This is The Collective Voice, and you're tuning in to Faith Transitions,
exploring the challenges and opportunities at the crossroads of ministry and innovation.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Faith Transitions. I am Reverend Phil Dieke, the Director of Congregational Innovation at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, and I head up the 787 Collective here at the seminary. The Collective being a young adult initiative that we have really seeking to center the voices of young adults while also doing our best to encourage the ongoing faith formation and exploration for young adults too. And so today I'm really excited to have Joshua with me, and grateful for Jesse Lightwell's, our mutual friend, who reached out and was like, you two should know each other. And then we had a short conversation earlier this week, actually, and then thought we really just need to start recording this. We need to stop talking here and press record at some point, because these are just really great conversations. Yes. But I'm just really excited to have you. Josh, I'd love for you to just give a little intro on who you are, a little background, what you're doing currently, but like what led you to what you're doing, and we'll dive in on some faith transition things here in a little bit. But who are you? What are you doing here?
That's awesome. Yeah. Shout out to Jesse, because this is we are very well met, and we realized that in our conversation on Monday. But yeah, man, I currently work at a resource center for people who battle with homelessness and being unsheltered. It's called the Stewpot. It's an awesome organization. I get to be a part of our philanthropy and engagement team, a part of volunteer services, helping to manage. We have a really big volunteer base because we've been around for about 50 years. And that has got kind of been snowballed into me. Like, I kind of snowballed into this for a while. My mom was always just a very, like, I will give you the shirt off my back, like, just a very benevolent, hospitable individual.
Mama knows best, right?
Exactly. A great archetype for my life in many ways. And so, yeah, for me, I just became really interested in ministry, what it looked like to be interested in ministry and to participate in ministry has obviously shifted tremendously over the last decade plus, and that's a lot of what we'll get into in this episode. But yeah, I have always been interested in doing ministry, and now I over the last probably 4 or 5 years have just been really interested in being in the care industry and in being a nonprofit. And so did a lot of youth enrichment, a lot of youth leadership work, and now stepping into kind of a new venture for me, which is working with people who are unsheltered. And it's obviously been a treat kind of being there for the last 6 months.
So Stewpot, correct me if I'm wrong here, has some affiliation with First Presbyterian downtown Dallas. Is that right?
Yes. So It was originally a ministry of the church. We were serving a bowl of stew for a meal. That's how we got the name. And it was just to address some food insecurity in the area. And then we kind of snowballed into a full-on resource center where now we provide housing, we help people get on track to housing. We provide enrichment programs for artists and artisans who are incredibly gifted and need a space and a studio to use their gifts. We provide meals every day. We provide about 1,000 meals a day. We help people recover vital documents. Basically, I'm taking you on a tour. I do tours as a part of my job. So you're getting a little information tour here. But still very much affiliated with and partnered with FPC. And that's kind of how I got involved, because I started going to FPC about 1.5 years ago.
Oh, so you got involved at the church first,
mm-hmm.
and then that led to the job afterwards.
Yes. Yeah. I was in a job transition, late fall, and the Stewpot just felt like a good idea.
Well, tell me, I'd love to hear how you got connected at FPC, because I actually, when I started working at the Presbyterian seminary, I thought, I've never been to worship at a Presbyterian church. I should probably go at some point. And because I knew Jesse, I was like, well, I'll just go to First Downtown and see what they got going on. And went to that modern service and just totally fell in love with Wood Street. I thought it was a really cool service. And honestly, my 11-year-old still, every time she's like, can we go back to that service? And I'm like, yeah, we're going to go back eventually. I'm trying to be a good United Methodist, clergy person and still have my Methodist representation here. But she loves that service too. So we'll have to come back and visit y'all sometime soon. But how'd you get connected there?
Yeah, if your daughter tells you to be a traitor, you got to be a traitor.
Well, especially if
Um,
my kid wants to go to church, right? I should be like, yes, let's figure out how to make that work, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Can't beat that. But no, yeah, essentially, I had taken about a 3 year hiatus from church. Um, Church had just become a space that was just synonymous with either abuse or a place where I felt like I had to kind of reduce who I was and my identity in many ways. And so I have really good friends who are also a part of the care industry and in different spaces and either nonprofit or just really passionate about these causes. And it's a friend group that I made here in Dallas. And as I've been in Dallas for the last 4 years, and yeah, one of my good friends invited me to come with her and her husband. And I mean, I fell in love with it the first time. Like, I mean, one, like, I had been championing egalitarian ideas, particularly when it comes to gender and women in leadership in the church. And then to find a staff where at the time there were two women pastors and an African American pastor, I was just like, okay, this is already like just the look, the aesthetic of this is great. And then, it was I had grown up Southern Baptist, and so it was kind of cool to experience some liturgy and to have that kind of switch up. And I'll talk a little bit more later about how my theology was already trending in that direction as far as like kind of a theme of my theology. And so, yeah, it's a great spot. There's great people there. And it's great for the season that I'm at in life right now. So but that's kind of the origin story of it.
Okay, so grew up Southern Baptist. Was that in Texas?
No, originally in Goshen, Mississippi.
Mississippi. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So if you don't know Goshen, Mississippi, you're in luck because you joined probably the rest of the human population in not knowing. I doubt
Yeah,
it's even on a map, but it was very formative for me, of course, and
sure.
have so many amazing friendships and still have family down there. And but yeah, went to a First Southern Baptist Church in Goshen, Mississippi. All white. We were like we were basically the only black family as far as like membership. There'd definitely be some people that would like every now and then pop in, pop out. But and that was just briefly, that was just a huge transition for me because I grew up originally in New Orleans. I was born in New Orleans. And outside of kind of going, downtown, going to the French Quarter, things like that, I never really saw a white person in person.
Oh
The
my
Catholic
gosh.
private, yeah, it's nuts. The Catholic private school I went to was all black. We went
Yeah.
to a prominent black mega church in the area, Greater St. Stephen's. And I mean, my world was just, I mean, completely the inner city I lived in, like it was all black. And then we moved to Mississippi, and it was a bit of a split at like my school and stuff. But
Sure.
like the church and a lot of the like leadership and infrastructure was very white. So that was just a massive transition for me. But yeah, Southern Baptist, white Southern Baptist church. It was a good time.
It was a good time, you say. Okay, so you grew up with that. At what point did you start transitioning? Here we go.
Right.
Like away from a more Southern Baptist expression of your faith, if you will.
Yeah, I think so, growing up in my household, like my parents who split and then remarried, so I kind of had a couple of households that I called home. But across the board, everyone was fairly liberal. While black people in America are for the most part socially conservative, just to be frank, the Republican Party is so racist that it just drives a lot of black people to at the very least be anti-racist and anti-white supremacy. And so a lot of my upbringing was, my parents always watching CNN and, things like that. And so then it was like, there was like this weird disconnect when I would go to church and all of theology was pointing in a more socially conservative bent. And here I was thinking, well, I'm the guru of the family. Like I'm seeing it clearly, and I got the right idea. And then it took time to realize, no, I'm splitting my identity. I do not agree with most of the social conservatism that is in this space, and I was raised in a far more socially liberal way in many ways. And so I think that was kind of the beginning. Just kind of noticing that kind of in my first few years of college, just starting to realize like, hey, I really don't align with a lot of this rigid conservatism in this space. And then on top of that, Trayvon Martin was huge. That whole situation. I think for me, it was watching evangelicals in particular respond to, what we can be honest about was a murder, or at the very least, an inappropriate killing, but like of a 17-year-old. And the response was pretty monstrous, if I'm honest. Like there was such a lack of humanity and empathy from a lot of people that I thought actually cared about at least people, even if they didn't like have a certain like demographic of people that they emphasized their care for, like they cared about people. And I was proven very wrong. And I think it just made a lot of sense for me to maybe consider a new path at that point.
And what, is this like high school? What's this? High school,
This
college?
is like college. I
Okay.
graduated in 2010, and so this
Okay.
is a couple years into college.
Yeah. Were you close to home during college?
I was, yeah. I went to community college in
Yeah.
Mississippi for a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I do feel like at college age is often that time where a lot of these, and obviously there's the social part that plays a reality into it too, but there's just something about being in a college setting that invites you into that kind of deeper exploration, and then
Yes,
can often cause a bit of a fissure between what you grew up with so often, and
yes,
um,
yeah, yeah,
but
and
I love that you approach it through the lens of faith like that. That's solid.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I had a English college professor who all we did was, I mean, the class was based on like short stories, and even just that, like learning literature from a more academic perspective, and not, even though seminary tries to have a more academic perspective on literature, a lot of seminaries kind of fall short, especially if they are a little bit more on the conservative wing. And so literally just being like, oh my gosh, I read my Bible now completely different, just based off just learning some of these skills of how to interpret literature, and how to understand different versions of literature and things of that nature. And so, yeah, it was such an obvious time to grow out of social conservatism, just because I was
Yeah.
just around a lot of people and a lot of information.
Yeah. I don't remember. Maybe it was Brian. I forget who said it, but reading the Bible literarily as opposed to reading it literally, like was an
Mm-hmm.
invitation to recognize that not everything written in there was meant to be taken at just face value, and that you can, in fact, find that truth behind the truth. I think is what Marcus Borg called it. So I love
Mm-hmm.
that idea of a new way of reading the scriptures that just kind of bring a whole new insight to it is really good.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so you were in Mississippi. Did you come straight to Texas from Mississippi?
Yeah, yeah. So I lived with a foster family for a little bit when I was in high school for about 6 months or so, and I mean, they just meant the world to me. And I view them as family, and I
Yeah.
love them. And the mom of the family got cancer,
Oh no.
and yeah, so diagnosed with cancer, and I was just like, well, my dad and my stepmom lived in Houston, and this family lived, right over in the Cypress area as well. And so, well, they lived closer to the Tomball area by the time
Mm-hmm.
I got there. But and so yeah, I was just like, I probably need to, and I'm always up for a new adventure. I kind of embrace transition in many ways. Like I like kind of life switch up, like kind of
Yeah.
big jarring life switch up. Like I don't mind it. I'm just kind of used to it at this point. And so yeah, got up here in like 2013. Didn't know 11 years later I'd still be in Texas. So
Surprise.
we're still here. So
Yeah.
bopped around, was in Tomball, Texas for a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
then was in College Station, Texas for a little bit, and then now in Dallas. So my life has kind of been big city, small town, just kind of back and forth. And
Yeah.
that's got its own fun nuances to it.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah.
Definitely nuances. Yeah. So you
Yeah.
said you kind of like transitions. Talk a little bit more about that. Like, what is? I mean, one of the things we find with our research and just conversations we have with young people so often is that this age of young adulthood is so much about transitions. And so often it's so disruptive to people because you get so comfortable or so kind of status quo in one space, and then a transition just totally disrupts that. But if transition is kind of your more regular, like maybe that's a whole different take on this, that it's not so much a disruption, but it's maybe an invitation, or maybe it's a just kind of a next step in a much larger journey. So I'd love to hear you to expound a little bit more on what you think about transitions and how that plays out.
Yeah, I'll be fair. It didn't start off as the healthiest thing. I mean, I just, being from a family where, had to deal with a blended family and things of that nature. And, just like I was in like third grade when we moved to, Mississippi. And so it's just like, that was a big shift. And like I mentioned, like even just the racial dynamic shift and things of that nature. And so, I think, it started off probably as just like, well, I'm accustomed to it, whether it's healthy or not. It just doesn't bother me as much. But I think as I've gotten older, I've just found ways to, um, in many ways to narrativize it and to just make it a part of my story. Just like, hey, like these transitions they're just seasons essentially, and whatever I experienced in the last season was really good for that season, and I may need a new season. I may need a spring or a summer, or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of it's been a way of life, and I think I found ways to find peace with it and to enjoy it. And I think for me, I think the language I used a second ago of just like, it really does feel like it's a new adventure to embark on. And I think for me, I just wonder, who is Josh going to become when this transition happens? Like, who do I get to become next? Like, what new aspects do I get to take on? What new information do I need to navigate this new space? Like, that's just all enjoyable for me. And so, I think kind of it started off with necessity, and then, like most things in life, necessity breeds adaptation. And so, it
I
became
love
great.
it. Who is Joshua going to become? That's a fantastic statement, and just a really great like perspective to look at life through.
Mm-hmm.
That recognize. Have you read Octavia Butler at all?
Nuh-uh.
Oh man, so one of my favorite quotes of hers, it's probably one of her most well-known quotes from her, I think it's her Parable series maybe, that she says this, but she says, all that you touch you change, all that you change changes you, the only lasting truth is change, God is change.
Mm.
And I just, that made me resonate so much with what her whole books, and I love this idea of it. But um yeah, what a great invitation of like just a recognition of becoming. I think that's a really beautiful invitation for folks. um so then the next clear question is, who is Joshua becoming? Who are you becoming, Josh? Like, now that you find yourself in this role at the Stewpot and connected at First Pres, and like um and then I didn't even mention this, but we should have mentioned this earlier too, like you have your own podcast, right? You do a podcast as
Mm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would love to hear, like, who do you find yourself becoming in this stage of life? And then once you answer that, like, who do you see yourself becoming beyond there, if you can
Yeah.
forecast that way?
Yeah. That's such a great question. I think like I this is probably the longest stint I've had in a place, and the most, obviously, as you get older, you get more and more financially stable, right? So I've been in Dallas for 4 years. This is the most financially, stable I've been in my life, naturally. And I think what's become cool, and what I feel like I'm becoming in this season, is like someone who is starting to identify with spaces. I think growing up, the only place that I really wanted to identify with was New Orleans. If Gaucher people are listening to this, no, I did not grow up thinking I wanted to be identified as someone who was from Gaucher. While I appreciate the friendships and the experiences there, that was not something I wanted to be a part of my identity. But now, I've worked in South Dallas. I've worked in Bonton. I've worked in West Dallas. I'm now in the downtown area. And for me, it's like those spaces have become spaces that I want to nurture. Like I still go back to my old job at Bridge Builders and play basketball with my kids. Like, I still have colleagues from former jobs that I want to stay in contact with. Like, I want to be a part of things that are happening in Dallas. Now, that doesn't mean that if life throws me something that I won't move, but I think there's a reality in which it's like, no, I feel like I can actually, kind of what they say, dig roots a little bit, but really begin to identify with like, no, Bontown matters to me and I care about the well-being of Bontown. Like, West Dallas matters to me and I care about the well-being of West Dallas. Like, the downtown area where we have a high concentration of people who are, struggling with homelessness. I want to help be a part of that story. And so I think that is kind of what I'm becoming in this season, is someone who wants to actually invest in where I'm at a lot. And I'm no longer in kind of a state where it would make sense that I'm going to make some kind of big transition soon. I feel like this is where I'm going to be for the foreseeable future. And who I'm becoming, our society really has a fetish for like youth. And I'm just like, nah, man, I want to be like 50 and awesome. Like I want to be
Love
like,
that.
yeah, like I want to be like 70 and like wise and like a lot of experience and a lot of scars and a lot of healing and some crucifixions, some resurrections. Like
Yeah.
I kind of I kind of want to I kind of want the long haul of life, and so I'm very intrigued to know what 45-year-old Josh is like.
Yeah.
Like I'm very intrigued to know what 70-year-old Josh is like, and like have been focusing on my health a lot over the last year and a half, and lost a lot of weight, like have some really cool like diet rhythms and exercise rhythms. And it's just like, so, whatever I'm becoming, I would hope that it's awesome. And I would hope that person's awesome. And I just think like, I think getting older, I feel like I feel like there is such a beauty in it that I wish more of society would recognize.
Well, I just turned 40 and I'm trying to not let it bother me, but my body is not keeping up like it used to, and it's really bothering me. Which is probably more about my lack of consistency in exercise than it is about like the actual age thereof. It's
Yeah.
probably a little bit of both, but I'm trying to not be too consumed with it because it is a number and I can always get more consistent, and there's a path there. Regardless. So I would love to I love that what you said about becoming. I think the awesomeness, I love that so much. I hope that the Joshua I'm becoming is awesome. I think it's a great answer. So some of the things that you are really focused on now, right? Like that have really incorporated your faith, and how your faith has played a role in you becoming so involved in the Stewpot, right? And like that your faith really is about not just a set of beliefs. I think I'm kind of going back to our conversation on Monday, but like is more than just a set of beliefs, but really kind of about an action piece too, and the living out thereof. I would love to just hear how that, like, you started to talk about it some with the idea of like an anti-racism, like being a part of what it meant to be a person of faith. But what have been some other catalysts you feel like that have really led you to have a transition or a shift or even an evolution of faith throughout the last, even if it's just in the last 5 or so years?
Yeah, I think reading the Gospels like has been a huge shift. I think we do give Paul kind of a bad rap of like, we make Paul the epistemological guy and Jesus the ethics guy, and
Guilty.
right.
I do that all too often. Too often I do that.
It's like red letters are superior, and it's like, well, yeah, in one sense, yeah, totally. Yeah, undeniably. But like, I do think that while I recognize that I don't necessarily agree with that dichotomy, I do think that there is something really rich about how Jesus interacted with the world, and it felt less heady and it felt more tangible. And I look at like the story of the man with two sons, and he has the one son that he tells to go do something, and he says yes, and then he doesn't go do it. And then he tells the other son, and he says, no, but then he goes and does it. And it's so obvious what son was faithful. And I look at, the story of, like, I don't know, Malcolm X, right? Like, Christians wouldn't exactly make Malcolm X like an archetype of their faith because he was Muslim. But I'm like, I certainly wouldn't make the Georgia, white racist preacher in 1940s, 1950s America my archetype. You know what I mean? Like, that's like the son who said yes and didn't go do it, right?
Oof. Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
right. And so I even, like, every time there's a judgment scene in the Bible, the question isn't, hey, what's your soteriology? Like, what's your, what's your doctrinal statement or whatever? It's like, what did you do?
Yeah.
And I think, like, there was a good friend of mine that I had in high school. We still sparsely keep up through social media, but his father passed away very suddenly. And I remember being at that funeral. It was a really formative time for me, and just hearing how people spoke about him. And I was just like, man, when I'm gone, I could care less about, like, becoming famous or,
Sure.
whatever. But, like, when they put me in the ground, I want it to be known that I was here and that I made an
Mm.
impact and that I did things, and that, that my life really mattered,
Yeah.
and so I think just reading the Gospels and just seeing, like, how important it is to do,
Hmm.
and, like, we do such a disservice when we act like the story of Jesus is he was born and then he just died. He was born and then he died.
Right.
And
Right.
it's like, no, there really was, like, I, you could have made the Gospels a lot shorter if that was really the story.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
he lived, and the things that he did in his life have to matter. And N.T. Wright has been so instrumental,
Mm.
in, like, giving that kind of fresh perspective on the gospel, and his scholarly work. And so and I'm just forever indebted to that guy. I've been speaking
Yeah.
so highly of him for, like, the last 8 years. So anyone
Yeah.
who's cared about anything I've had to say, I've mentioned NT Wright a bunch. But yeah, I think my faith just went more in a direction of, I could care less what I know. In fact, I
Mm.
don't know anything. We don't know anything. Like, I'm starting to have more and more of a existential, like, dread of, like, death, like, because I don't know anything. I don't really
Sure.
know. We act like we have so much certainty about what happens on the other side. We don't. And
No clue.
so, because I don't know anything, then I just want to do everything because I don't
Yeah.
know anything.
Yeah. So interesting. I go back to the book of Ecclesiastes a lot because I feel like that's exactly what the teacher, right, like Kohelet, the author of Ecclesiastes, really wrestles with,
Hmm.
right? Is like, we don't really know, we have no idea, and like,
Right.
here we are. Like, the best we can do is, like, make the most of what the word God has put before us, right? Like,
Yeah.
literally says, eat, drink, and be merry.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And, and
like
and and you know what's so fun about that? Like, those three books right there. Proverbs, Job, Ecclesiastes. Like, I, so many people approach life like it's. In fact, I'll say it. The Republican Party approaches life like it's the Book of Proverbs, where it's like,
yes,
you know,
everything's black or white. Like,
yeah, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, I stick the
yeah,
formula in, it works.
yeah,
Like, train up your child in the way they should go. Like, how they interpret these verses.
yeah,
Like, it's just like, whatever I put into it, I get out of it. And I just love that Ecclesiastes and Job are both right there to say that is not how life works.
yeah,
Job
yeah,
literally was, like, the model of doing Proverbs right, and his life went to absolute, like, shit. Like, you know
yeah,
what I mean?
totally.
Like, and so I love that even that complexity is within Scripture. Like, no, 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 I'm the, like, God is saying through, the inspired word. Like, I'm not telling you that there's any formula to this.
Right.
You just do and live, and let things play out.
Yeah. I think I heard it one time described in wisdom literature that Proverbs is like your elementary wisdom literature, like,
Yeah, yeah,
and then, like, Ecclesiastes gets you from, like, high school and starting in college, and then Job's like your doctorate work, like,
yeah.
Job's just the, like, you can wrestle with it and wrestle with it and wrestle with it and still, like, not fully come to
I
any
love
kind
it.
of, like, good answer, right? Just better questions. Just better
Yes.
questions.
Yeah.
I love the wisdom literature. I think it's so good, so rich.
Hmm.
Okay, you've you've loosely mentioned politics twice here. Clearly, that is something of passion to you. What
Hmm.
got you so interested in politics?
Yeah, politics was just a great contrast to, honestly, I used to be so bored in church growing up.
Yeah.
So bored. It felt so untangible to my life. It's like I would be going through things where it's like, I mean, think like my transition from New Orleans to Mississippi.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'm around a bunch of white people. Now, as a kid, that's just different looks of faces. But
Sure.
like my mom was very clear of like, no, there are social dynamics that are going to shift for us being in this space. And as these social dynamics were shifting, none of my faith addressed it. At least
Mm,
the faith that the Southern Baptists gave me, right?
sure.
Which now in hindsight to what they got going on over there, you kind of know why, right? But
Ooh.
like, you're right. But like, like I was just like, man, like I need something that actually, and obviously getting to, man, what a fortunate time to exist to have lived under a black president for 8 years, like, and to have voted for that. I was old enough to get a chance to vote for him, and
Yeah.
so I think just having something that was contrasting just this like constant like epistemological existential stuff of just like, no, here's some tangible reality. And I think I also just got to a place where I was like, and it's really complicated too. Like, as much as I love President Obama, like I would consider myself farther left than him, materially on a lot of social issues. And so having to figure out, like constantly having to figure out, like, what are my politics? In fact, what, as a black man in America, what are my politics? And I honestly think we just had such a beautiful, complicated situation of watching two black men like communicate to each other two very different forms of black politics in Kendrick and Drake. You know what I mean? And so I'm just like, politics are so complicated, and I think it's just, honestly, as someone who's like very intellectually curious
Yeah.
personally, like I love how much work you have to do to constantly think through what are my politics. And so I think for me, um that's kind of what's helped me be a little bit of a junkie. And I just found some really good spaces where they talk about politics in a very fun and funny, like satirical way. And so that's also helped.
You just Kendrick and Drake, right? You if people want to go hear your um more elaborate explanation thereof, the latest episode on the moral minority, right? That's the name of the podcast. That's
Yes,
your
sir.
the
Yes,
title,
sir.
right? So
Uh-huh.
the most recent episode is a 2+ hour breakdown of the Kendrick Drake Lamar. It's a Kendrick Lamar Drake kind of like rap battle that took place. So
Yeah.
I was just telling him before we started recording, like that I only got about halfway through it, so I've still got to go back and finish the final part of it. But it's really good. It's a really great historical look at this battle, and that it didn't just start a month ago or whatever, a month and a half ago. Like
Hmm.
this has been an
Hmm.
ongoing thing. I
Right.
love that, and I love that you just reference it in the way of politics too. I think that's a really fascinating connection, and I don't know. I'd love to hear you kind of like tease it out a little more if you have more
Yeah.
on
Yeah. I don't
what that
mind.
looks like.
I think there have always been two kind of expressions of how black people have seen themselves in the American context. You either have kind of the black nationalist perspective, where, and that's complicated, and there's a spectrum of what that looks like, obviously. Or you have kind of the black integrationist perspective. So the black nationalist perspective is a little bit more Afrocentric, a little bit more, we want to be homogenous, consolidate resources, protect ourselves, become insular. And then there's the black integrationist perspective, and that's, hey, we want to find ways to infuse ourselves into broader American culture in order to benefit from those resources, normalize our existence, and lessen discrimination. Um, and so you've always had the Booker T. Du Bois, dichotomy, the MLK, Malcolm X, the Ali Frazier, like you've always had those dichotomies. And I think people missed that Drake and Kendrick were that dichotomy. Kendrick is the Afrocentric black nationalist perspective, and Drake is more of the integrationist perspective. And I side with the integrationist perspective, as I view it as more of a progressive and ultimately successful idea. There are Black people who would challenge me on that, and they're smarter than me, and they should challenge me on that. But that's kind of where I'm at. And so as I'm watching this beef, that's when I'm actually seeing take place. And what I find so fascinating is I'm really curious to see what direction. I know Drake's from Canada, so a lot of people don't give him that, but he was given the keys to the city of Memphis, so he's got some stake in America. But I'm really interested to see what direction not only we as a people, as African Americans, but what direction um, kind of everyone who was watching that, what direction do they see as like, oh, like what what is a good next move for Black enfranchisement and healthy wealth distribution and elevation in society. And so I think that those were the politics that were kind of underneath it that if you're not very familiar with African American studies, you would have missed. And I think it was really fascinating to watch it play out.
I know I told you this right before we started recording, but like listening to you talk about this it gave me a comparison of how I feel about when I started to really learn to read scripture literarily, right? Like to really get to a sense of understanding the context and recognizing that there's so much more than just what's at the surface level. Hearing you break down the Kendrick Drake rap battle really like made me feel the same way of like, oh, there's so much more to these lyrics when I actually understand what the references are and what context is being represented here. And so I thought it was a really beautiful connection and a really great parallel to how you can really like what scripture like not translation scripture interpretation can really mimic the interpretation and understanding of modern day society and sociology and how those like it's a mirror there, right? Like scripture holds up a mirror if we're willing to do the deep work to dive into those kind of things and to really understand those complexities. But so often it's just easier to read it face value and be like, but it says this.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So I love even like again it challenged me because so often what I was hearing was like, oh, Drake's a sellout, right? Drake's a sellout to just sell more albums and wants to just be a pop star, whereas Kendrick's like more authentic hip hop star. So anyway, it was very enlightening. I encourage everyone to go listen to it. Link in the show notes. Go check it out because it's a really great breakdown and you do a really good job of it. So
I appreciate
I am curious on the politics side of things again. Not that we just spend a ton of time on politics, but I just think, I mean, the old saying, right? All politics is local. And so as somebody who is working in the nonprofit world and specifically nonprofit that is working with those who are most vulnerable in our community here in Dallas, I would love to know what are the things that you're really engaging in, and not just you, but like the people that you're in connection with, other young adults that you're in connection with. I talked to a young adult in Seattle one time who was like, I really want to be more involved in community organizing and I want to do it as a person of faith, but like turns out there's nobody in the faith world doing it here. And so I'm like finding myself doing it more with all these like different like quote secular organizations and then like bringing my faith to that, but I'm not finding the solidarity with people of faith in this work. So I'd love to hear like what other young adults are really engaged in this like local politic battle and like what are the specific issues and topics and things that you're really diving into.
Yeah. Briefly, a lot of young adults, even around me, feel so defeated and disengaged. Like, dude, the Bernie thing took a lot of wind out of people's sails, man. We thought we had it a couple times. We thought we had someone that was at the very least a little bit more progressive on a lot of these issues, and I think, and then of course 2024 just people looking at the lineup that we have as far as the choices, it's just discouraging, right? And I think that's affected local politics too. I think there are people who have been here for a while in Dallas that I'm engaging with who are very much more familiar with the flavor and the aspects of politics here, and even still, I think it's been discouraging. But I will say I saw a lot of energy around the school board conversations over the last couple of years, and definitely had a really cool opportunity to be around people who were really engaged in that and thoughtful about that. I think some of the things that I personally focus on, when I lead either high school students or oftentimes, kind of the mediator between me and a lot of my work with high school students has been, college volunteers. And so getting to engage with them as well is showing people, hey, like, a lot of human behavior is provoked by environments. Human behavior is provoked by environments, and therefore, instead of critiquing behavior, we need to fix structures, right? So, like, I read this amazing book, and I got to interview this woman, and was so blessed to do so. Melissa Flora Bixler, and she has a book called "How to Have an Enemy," and in the book, she talks about, hey, like, my goal is not to necessarily win my enemy over, but to create an environment where my enemy can no longer do systemic and material harm to me, which is what's best for both me and my enemy. And so I think just recognizing how important environmental provocation is to people's behavior and to the rhythms that we see in society, and on top of that, having more comprehensive solutions to things. Like, everyone's solution to the type of work I do is like, let's go tell those people to stop being lazy, and you don't want to caricature it that way, but essentially, when you get down to the bare bones of what they're saying, that's ultimately it. And I'm like, beloved, a
You may say
comprehensive.
beloved, you're not thinking beloved.
Right, exactly, exactly. It's me, it's Paul opening up Corinthians with, like, you guys are such faithful saints, and you guys are so awesome. And before I go in,
It's
here's
that
what I have to
compliment
say.
sandwich, right? You got to put
Yeah,
both sides before I get that really good meat in the middle. Yeah, it's good. That's
exactly.
good.
But I'm just like, comprehensive social issues deserve a comprehensive solution.
Ooh, amen.
Dr. King didn't go around, doing door-to-door ministry thinking that he was going to convert the South. He was like, I'm just going to make it illegal for you to be, like, publicly discriminatory against me. Like, and I just think, like, that's how we have to, I think, just shifting our politics to that. I see in a lot of, like, and I praised Obama earlier, so I'm gonna give him a couple jabs, and then I'm gonna let him be, because he's a legend and I love him and all that. But, like, you look at his response to Trayvon Martin and to the white supremacists who came into the church in, I think it's North Carolina, right? Charleston, North Carolina, I'm
Mother
pretty
Mary.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
South Carolina. Yeah.
Sorry, there's so many
There's too
instances.
many. There's too many,
Exactly,
right?
that's
Yeah,
when you start
totally.
to run together. But he gets in a black church and has this amazing, like, eloquent, like, breakdown of, like, the history of the black church and how powerful and potent it's been, and sings Amazing Grace and all this. And I'm like, dude, propose legislation about, like, gun usage. Like, it's like, we got to start having more comprehensive solutions to things like that. Like, yeah, we can do this beautiful ceremony that makes, like, people who are a little bit more prejudiced and bigoted feel like, okay, maybe I'm not going to go into church and, like, kill a Sunday school class. But I'm like, can we just make it to where it, like, socially is, like, more and more impossible for them to do that? Same thing with Trayvon Martin. He's like, that could have been me. It's like, totally agree. How do we make sure it's not you? You have Secret Service. The average American does not, And so I think that's a lot of the push, is, like, pulling people a little bit out of, like, kind of a dystopian mindset and reminding people, hey, you cannot win this on the interpersonal level. We've tried and tried and tried and tried. We have to win this on a comprehensive level, and we have to start pushing for policies that have broad, sweeping ability to lessen discrimination and to lessen disparity outcomes and things of that nature.
One, just amazing. I love that so much. I think it's so good, and it, like, warms my heart so much to hear you say them. Like, I want all our young people to be hearing this and thinking, like, yes, absolutely. Like, it's the whole, like, oh, just got to change hearts and minds mentality. Like, and like, sure, yes, that's a part of it, but like you said, hearts and minds only go so far. There's systemic things that continue to be in place that if we don't get those changed as well, then change all the hearts and minds you want, there's still
Yeah.
going to be systemic issues that continue to oppress people and lead to growing suffering among typically minoritized communities. Anyway, okay, yes, fantastic. Secondly, for all those young people that you just talked about who feel really kind of again, the burnout after Bernie or whatever the case is, right? What's your word of hope to those people? Because obviously, there's a presidential election coming up, sure, but I actually heard of a colleague of mine who does a lot in politics a while back say the reality is the governor election we have in 2 years is going to be way more influential on the state of Texas than the presidential election is going to be. Not to say that it's not an important election, but like the reality is it's going to affect us way more based on who's our governor in Texas. So
yeah.
Like what's your word? And sometimes I hate the idea of hope. Just like I feel like we push it like you have to have hope when sometimes it just feels hopeless, and you just need to embrace the hopelessness to actually get you to activate sometimes. With that said, whether it's a word of hope or whether it's a word of encouragement, whether it's just a hey, here we are as young people, like we have an opportunity. What is your word for folk?
Yeah, as well, I want to start with I empathize not wanting to vote for either one genocidal maniac or another. Let's just start with that. Like we all see it. We all see what's happening in Gaza, the awful nature of how Biden is not only overseeing this, but financially contributing to it. And the reality that Trump would be no better in that and would probably even escalate that terrible situation. And so, especially, man, if there are family members of people over there, like, what you do in November is a sacred choice for you. And I think it's really complicated and difficult. And I think if there are, especially now there's so many college students and like young adults riled up against, the Biden administration for its aggressive and just like awful mishandling of that situation and so many others on a domestic front, that I just totally understand people who feel hopeless. But what I would communicate to them is you need to create the best environment to get things done. The truth is, if Martin Luther King would have had to deal with Barry Goldwater, he wouldn't have gotten anything done. He wouldn't have gotten anything done under a very rigid segregationist administration. He needed someone like LBJ, who was aggressively flawed and racist himself. But he needed someone like that who could create the kind of social environment that he can get things accomplished. One of my favorite presidents ever in American history, as far as like how much he did for the material well-being of the average American, is FDR. He also had the Japanese internment camps. They're all awful. It's like you're picking the shortest kid in kindergarten. They're all awful. And so I think when you look at this situation, what can we really do on the local front if we have someone who is, and I'm trying to like be somewhat like tactful in what I communicate here, but someone who is as far right as you can get for an American president in President Trump. What can we accomplish on the local level if they're blocking everything? Look at how difficult it is to get things done because of the nature of the Supreme Court. And so what you try to do is make an amoral vote. I despise both of these men. My vote will be amoral, and I'm not afraid to say it's going to be Biden, unless he, passes out. Like that's who I'm going to go for, right? And like it's amoral. I despise him and everything he's about, but he creates the best atmosphere and social environment for me to continue the work that I'm doing, and hopefully to push either him or the next administration in a better direction. He just creates the best environment for that. Climate change is so real. We're all hot, and it's like having a president that at least cares about it to a president that maybe doesn't even
it. Yeah,
exactly.
Totally. Yeah.
So I just think that is just make it amoral if you need to, because that's just the reality of what it is with these two guys. But create as conducive as an environment as you can to do the work that you want to do on the ground level.
Whew. Take a deep breath. It's a lot, right? It's a lot going on.
Yes.
Actually, I think I want to wrap there because I do like that idea of like sometimes you just got to grit your teeth and bear it, like
yeah.
And some of the young adults that I know who are so put off by this election have basically said like maybe it all just needs to burn. And I hear the frustration, right? I hear the frustration in the midst of it. But, you know, as a United Methodist clergy, like our first tenet is do no harm, right? Do no harm, do all the good you can. Like there's a whole lot of harm that's going to be done. And, you know, when systems burn, turns out a lot of people burn with it, you know?
Yes.
And
yes,
again, I say that recognizing the total moral like ambiguity in the midst of all of that. And it's just such a hard, but I appreciate your word of just like amoral judgment. And like, this gives me the best scenario to do the work that I feel called to do. And like you said, like being really invested in this space that you want to nurture. I love that so much. I think that's such a beautiful statement. So, okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate those words. Any final thought that you want to leave with young adults? Just a message to the church as the church tries to wrestle with what do we do to engage younger generation of people in faith formation? I know we didn't really totally dive into that. Well, my guess is, Joshua, I think we're going to have many more conversations in the future. At least I hope we will.
Oh yeah, I can't wait. I would love to.
I love conversations with you.
Yes.
But if you had a message either to the church or to young adults in this idea of faith formation, what would that message be?
Yeah, man. So I would say that you know, if age has wisdom and youth has potential, I would say kind of both of those sides of the church and of society just need to learn how to lean on each other. You know, society has shifted so much over the last 60 years. And continues to shift tremendously in America because of just the awful foundation we had in so many ways, and how we needed to move towards being egalitarian and being democratic. And the church has had to kind of, on a parallel side, do the exact same thing, you know. Unfortunately, we've kind of been at the same pace, sometimes a little bit behind where, you know, broader society is. And so I would say lean on each other, man. Like, in many ways, now youth is going to have a lot of wisdom because of how much things are changing so rapidly, daily and annually. And so there's a lot of wisdom from youth and a lot of potential for some really cool evolution of people who have been in the game for a while. And then there's a lot of potential for youth to shift drastically the demographic nature of America, to shift drastically the philosophical and ideological nature of America, and to lean on some of the wisdom of, you know, there's a lot of wisdom in like from the older generation of like, hey, move slow, be patient, understand that there are small victories. And so I think both sides kind of mutually submitting to each other is, I think, a really beautiful future for the church and really for America broadly.
That almost sounds like a biblical idea, mutual submission, right? That sounds like a good idea.
Good old Ephesians 5 stuff.
That's right. A way better interpretation than what often gets thrown out for it.
Right.
Man, this is so good. I really love this conversation. Like I said, I hope that there's many opportunities for us to have further conversations in the future. And if people are here in Dallas or visiting Dallas, I hope that you'll stop by the Stewpot and check out the incredible work they're doing in the midst of downtown Dallas. Or if you're here on a Sunday morning, go check out Wood Street Worship at First Presbyterian Church, and you'll probably find Josh there as well on a Sunday morning, right? Isn't that where you usually go?
Oh yeah.
We're usually with that crew. And then if you want to check him out on his podcast, check out the Moral Minority, which is just a great title for a podcast, by the way. I love that.
Appreciate it.
Other places people can find you in the digital world or otherwise?
Oh man, if you want to be completely inundated into this beef, follow me on Twitter, because I mean that's like all my Twitter is probably going to shift to like LSU here in the fall. I'm a big LSU fan. Okay. But yeah, it's heavy Drake Kendrick right now. And then I'm fun on Instagram too. I kind of mix it up with a little bit of politics, a little bit of hip hop. But yeah, I'm just my luck. I'm pretty easy to find. Joshua Luckett's a decently unique last name. Good. So yeah, so pretty easy to find. But cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, man, thanks so much for your time, and I'm grateful for your contribution and all that you're doing in the city of Dallas here.
Awesome. Thank you. This is a great time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Collective Voice,
the premier podcast of the 787 Collective.
Click the link in our show notes to connect with us and learn how you can be the lucky recipient of free 787 Collective swag.
And don't forget, when you rate and review us, you're tricking the algorithm for the common good.